Welcome to CK Sports Talk on 99.1 CKXS. CK Sports Talk is brought to you in part by the Chatham-Kent Sports Network and 99.1 CKXS.
Tonight's edition of CK Sports Talk is brought to you in part by Victory Ford Lincoln, 301 Richmond Street, Chatham.
Thank you, Jay Smith, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to CK Sports Talk here on the Mighty XS. It's 99.1 on your radio dial. My name's Peter Cobb, and sitting across from me, yes, you know him, as the wizard from Wallaceburg, Mr. Shawn Patrick Moynihan. Our producer, Corey North, who'll be heading south to Ridgetown, that is hanging around doing some commercials in the back, and I think he's got some pizza-flavored chips if you want to drop by and do a taste test.
He's got lots of chips and treats in there, Pete.
Before we go any further, Mr. Moynihan, we have received word that the lights are out in the whole block from State Farm to Canadian Tire on both sides of the street, and the lights are out at the Reholm Street, so be careful in that area. I know the bridge is out. We saw some emergency vehicles over there. I think the Baseline Bridge.
Yeah, we could see it from the 40 coming in, Pete, so seems to be a little difficulties on that side of town tonight, but hey, a great opportunity tonight, Pete. Morris Dalla Costa. We met Morris by accident, really. We were doing a football game at the University of Guelph. It was the biggest game in the country that day. It was a playoff game between University of Western Ontario, a perennial powerhouse, and the upstart Guelph Griffins. A tremendous victory that day by Guelph, one of the biggest victories in the history of that football program. If you remember, one of your favorite players, I believe number 32, the Rhino.
Oh, Rob Carnegie. Was he?
Rob Farquharson.
Sorry.
And I forget how many total yards that he just ran wild that day. Anyways, in our booth was this gentleman sending tweets and messages out, and it was Morris Dalla Costa. And what a joy it was to sit with him and talk with him. And you're going to hear of some of his experiences tonight that have just been incredible. Any sports fan's dream, really.
Well, and, part of the reason we selected him, we are CK Sports Talk. A ton of people in this area read his column because here in Chatham-Kent, they read the London Free Press and read his column. He's been involved in media, print, sports reporting for over 40 years. Remarkable.
Yeah, for sure. And he had some really interesting stories to tell us, not only about sports, but also about the just the nature of the print business and reporting on sports and the tremendous challenges he faces. I think he said at one point when he started at the London Free Press, they had 15 people reporting in the sports department. Today, I think he said four and really only two that are full-time. The other people dabble in it and do a number of other things there at the but I like reading Morris, and I'm going to tell you why, Pete. He's one of the rare ones who has an opinion. And sometimes his articles and his perspective has a little bit of a bite in it, but I like it when an announcer, a writer, expresses an opinion. That's what this world's about.
I agree, and I remember if he's the guy that wrote some things about the Windsor basketball team that London was participating in, Windsor refused him entry into the arena. I believe this is a calendar year ago because of things that he put in print about the team. He thought they were a little bit too negative.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, it's an opinion. You may disagree with it, but he gets you thinking.
Well, that actually sent shockwaves out through that basketball league. And since then, they've come up with policies that you can't, charge a reporter with trespassing and things like that. And actually, when we met with him, he was on his way down to Windsor to do a big basketball game there. And ironically, Pete, that basketball game was about a week ago, won by the London team, the Lightning. In the pregame warm-up, there was a little bit of scuffle between the teams.
No kidding.
So there's some real bad blood. But Morris Dalla Costa really, he expresses an opinion. I remember we talked to him a couple of years ago about Junior A hockey coming to Chatham when there was a bit of a buzz about that. And he shot me down so quickly. He said, "Are you kidding me? Like, How would you sell tickets? How would you sell boxes? It's just not an easy task. So you're going to hear some very interesting things from the great Morris Dalla Costa.
And we've got him separated into two sections, where the first part of our interview. And, boy, he came right to your house. We had just such a comfortable conversation around your kitchen table. And you're right. He just, that's a couple of times he's made the trek to Chatham to chat with us. I have such respect for that. Just a super guy.
Yeah, and Pete, as I said, when you hear about some of the events he has covered, like he's actually attended and covered for media outlets, it's a sports fan's dream, really. World Cups, World Series, Canada Cups. Man, lucky guy.
No kidding. And some of the characters, like you said, that he interviewed. I love when he talked about Sparky Anderson. What a soundbite. Even Michael Ray Richardson, the former coach of the London Lightning basketball team, who had a tremendous basketball career, and openly admit he snorted that away, literally.
For sure.
But got back into...
Morris had a tremendous relationship with him.
He did.
He shared a lot. And, of course, that league was trying to make it in Canada. And, of course, the London Lightning have had some success, and Morris really enjoys talking to that head coach.
All right, folks. Well, I want you to sit back, relax, and let's enjoy. Let's hope I push the right buttons here, Mr. Moynihan, and enjoy listening to Morris Dalla Costa. All right. Well, folks, we are truly thrilled here at CK Sports Talk. We have the Sultan of sports writing in southwestern Ontario and beyond, Mr. Shawn Patrick Moynihan. I'm looking across at the great Morris Dalla Costa of the London Free Press. Morris, first of all, thank you for driving all the way from London to be here with us, and thank you for joining us on CK Sports Talk.
Well, it's a pleasure. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. Good company, good food. There's food here, by the way, so and a beautiful view, and it was a great drive. Actually, it's wonderful to be here. I appreciate it.
Morris, you've been in journalism since 1976. Tell us about the early days. Tell us how you got to London, Ontario.
Well, holy mackerel, 1976. God, when you say it like that, it makes it it's like a bit of a prison sentence. I started off working at the Kenora Minor News. Now, Kenora, Ontario is so far into northwestern Ontario that we're 2 hours from Winnipeg. We're still in Ontario, though. And I started, making $150 a week, doing everything. And it's the way all young people start. They want you to get some experience, and you pay for the experience. They don't really pay you. So it's actually it was tremendous experience for me because I did everything back then. It's like, I did sports, I did news, I covered city council, I covered a school board, and we had 2-week shifts where we developed pictures. We did our own picture developing back then when they actually had film. It wasn't digital back then. So you'd take your pictures, and then you'd go in this little closet that we had. Oh my Lord, I just remembering it as, and it backed onto the parking garage where the papers were taken out. So at 4 a.m, you'd go in and you'd roll this film onto these canisters, which I was terrible at, because if the edges caught, of course, you'd get dark green and your film would be ruined, and I was never any good at that. And so I was always terrified because it was done in the dark, and I'd pray that after I'd taken the things from the canister, there was no dark green spots on it, which I would think 98% of the time there was always at least one film that was completely ruined. But anyway, and so and then you'd have the honor of going to your editor-in-chief with your pictures, and he would look at it. And we had a surly guy, he was pretty surly, named Bill Nelson. He liked to drink, to be honest with you. And in the morning, about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, when you'd present these pictures, he'd take the pile, and literally it would always be like this. And he'd look at it, and he'd grab the top picture, and he'd go, crap, throw it off the desk. Crap, throw it off the desk. Yeah, maybe I can use that, put it aside. Crap, put it on the desk. It was a remarkable experience. So you learn to actually perform. And from there, I worked there a little more than a year. I covered, I covered hockey, a lot of hockey. Had some good players that came through there. Players like Mike Allison, who eventually played for the Maple Leafs and things like that. And then after a year, I decided I couldn't take it. So I left without a job and wound up getting a job in Oshawa on a weekly. For 3 years, I worked on a weekly. Started as a weekly, then became twice weekly, and then became 3 times weekly, Oshawa This Week. And from there, the Oshawa Times sort of poached me to go over and do their hockey because they liked what I did, I guess. And so I worked there for 3 years and did a bunch of sort of freelance work in the meantime, and got lucky and came to London. January 9th was actually 33 years in London for me. As difficult it is to believe. And I was only going to stay 5 years. In fact, the first 2 years I didn't even hang my pictures because I wasn't going to be there that long, right? And so then inevitably you settle in, you meet people, you have a family, you know how it works. So that's where it was.
Oh, that's great. Morris, I was really amazed. Maybe a year or two ago, we did a show with you, and you were sharing with us some of your experiences and some of the tremendous sporting events you've had a chance to cover. Share with our listeners some of those tremendous events you've been at.
Well, I've been a lucky man, honestly. Sometimes it takes time for people in the business to get their break. Some people just walk into a business and get their break, and other people, have to wait. And I waited, but along the way, I've gotten the opportunity to do some things, and I've been fortunate. Not a lot of people can't say that in our business. I guess for me, soccer's always been one of my favorite sports. I love that. I love NFL football. I like hockey. I like baseball. I've had a chance to do just about everything except an Olympics, which, as we were talking, I'm not a huge fan of covering Olympics because they're such a show, so to speak. And I haven't done a Super Bowl, which I would like to do, and I don't know if I'll get the chance. But I guess for me, the biggest highlight for me was I've done 4 World Cups and 3 European Soccer Championships. And the biggest highlight for me was, I guess, my very first one was in 1986 in Mexico, which happened to be the only one that Canada's ever qualified for, which was one of the reasons I was there. But I was fortunate enough to be at Azteca Stadium in June when Argentina played England in a quarterfinal. And it was the game that Diego Maradona scored the 2 goals, one with his hand. And the second goal was the FIFA goal of the century, where he dribbled by 5 or 6 English players and put the ball in the net. And even at that time, you looked at it and you thought, I think I just saw something remarkable. And then when you had a chance to think about it and the way it all worked out, it was pretty stunning. To think that of all the games I had a chance to see, I was sitting in a stadium to do that one. That was probably my biggest highlight. I did the 1987 Canada Cup of Hockey when Mario Lemieux scored the winner with just over a minute to go, which was pretty exhilarating. I don't think I've ever heard a place that loud. It was literally, Azteca Stadium was loud, but there was 110,000 people there.
Right.
Cobb's Coliseum was insanely loud to the point where you're sitting up top and you're going, good Lord, what's going on here? And I can't remember the year, but I was being a Cleveland Browns fan, please pray for me. But being a Cleveland Browns fan, I was at Brown Stadium when John Elway led the Denver Broncos, the famous drive, 98 and a half yards. And then, with about 2 minutes to go, he led them down, forcing overtime. And then eventually the Broncos, of course, won in overtime. That was thrilling. And it's not just that. I mean, I've covered World Series. I was at the game where Jack Morris won 10 innings in a 7-inning, or the 10-inning
in Minnesota.
Game 7 in Minnesota.
They won that ball game.
I covered that game. It was tremendous, and there again, it was the anticipation. And you sort of knew that it could have gone 16, but nobody was going to yank him off the diamond, which was remarkable. So, but it's not just that. There's a ton of other things. We look at the big picture, but for me, remarkable things in sports can happen at any level, whether it's a peewee level or, there's always something phenomenal. Even, I've done a lot of college sports, and I've, 2 of the most remarkable sporting events I've ever attended was, and I want to say 2009 or 2010 Yates Cup game in Kingston, where Queens beat the Western Mustangs when Mike Falls played much of the game with a torn ACL. In fact, he'd had it for a number of weeks. Right. And when he refused to remain on the bench, it came out in the last few seconds, hobbling. And it was a 43-39 game, I think. And that game was remarkable simply because of the score and the excitement. And then just this year, one of the greatest meltdowns in the history of football.
Michael Falls, the
head coach for the Laurier Golden Hawks, when the Mustangs were leading by 21 points with 8 minutes left and lost the Yates Cup. Stunning. It was a stadium where literally afterwards it was zombie-like. I've never quite seen it like that, where players are talking normally, but you could tell they're shell-shocked, glassy-eyed, some crying, wondering what the hell happened. So those are just some of the events.
Well, it's funny, Morris, because I had that on my list, the debacle at UWO, because I know you really shoot, you're a straight shooter when you do your article, especially on Western football. I mean, the year before, Guelph went in there and had a fourth quarter tremendous comeback to stun Western, and we do some work for Guelph, and we do their play-by-play, so we're close to that. I'm just curious, Coach Marshall, after that game, did you have a conversation with him after the?
Well, of course, and he was at that level where I think he comprehended what happened, but it's very difficult to put words. And Coach Marshall is one of these guys that is very passionate about what he does. I don't think it quite hit him when it happened, but I do know that weeks later, when I talked to him, he said, I think I need it. I think I might bring in an offensive coordinator.
Right.
And sure enough, they brought it in.
Yeah.
So I think the level of that defeat can be measured in Greg Marshall giving up one of the things he loves to do more than anything, and that's call plays. So I think the realization was that maybe he had too much on his plate. I do know that perhaps for me it would have been in the top 10 of things in sports, and I've seen a lot of sports where you literally sat there and said, I cannot believe this is happening.
Right.
This is not happening. It's like from another planet or world, right? Mm-hmm. That's how fearful, how much the breakdown was there. And you can tell terrified. When players are literally afraid to do anything, when the second they get the puck, they dump it, or you could see it. There was this sort of, it's hard to explain unless you were there, this fear factor. Please don't hit the ball to me. Please don't throw the ball to me. Please, I need a first down. Let's get out of here. Mm-hmm. Never happened. And you could tell that when it was going south, it went south pretty quickly.
And yet on the other side of the coin, Coach Falls and that Laurier team, the momentum was just so much in their favor.
And you know what Coach Falls said after the game? He said, I was the only one crazy enough to believe we could do it. I said, did you really believe you could do it? And he said, yes, of course I did, sort of. But, I think once they scored the second touchdown to bring it close, everybody believed because the momentum was such a shift. But nobody's going to convince me the Laurier players, even after they scored that first touchdown, to bring it back to 14. I don't believe they could do it either. So, it's just one of the remarkable turnarounds I've ever seen.
Right. And we've met Michael Falls several times, and you talk about cool, calm, composed.
One of my favorite people.
And how that's just reflected on his team.
Yeah.
Morris, tell us about some of the real unique and different personalities you've encountered as you've covered the sports world.
Well, a lot of people think it's really exciting. First of all, I'm probably one of the few reporters and columnists that think that the most overrated thing in a sports story is the quote, because I think there's rarely do you get great quotes that it's worth beating your head against, the wall trying to get a hold of people. In sport, a lot of sports people don't like reporters. They don't want to sit there and give you a quote, So for me, whenever you get the personalities, they get the really good personalities. That's terrific. Like for me, some of the best hockey personalities, Darryl Sutter, and in L.A., Hitchcock.
Great Ken Hitchcock.
Oh, Ken Hitchcock.
Really?
Oh, they're great. Great quotes. Great quotes. And so it's always a pleasure going to their press conferences, as it is John Tortorella for a variety of different reasons. So all of those, I've met, and they're going to give you something that's worthwhile, especially if they're in a heated situation. It's terrific. I've had George Bell, if you remember the old George Bell, was a guy who didn't like the press very much, but would interact with you and would give you lots of stuff you could put in the paper and not put in the paper, if you know what I mean. You know, we had several confrontations, actually. I'll always remember the year he won the MVP, we were in Dallas for the winter meetings. And it's a long story, and I won't bore you with it. But anyway, it was a game actually in Tiger Stadium when the year that the Jays were blowing that 6.5 game lead. And yes, I know a lot of people are going to cheer for that.
A lot of Tiger fans.
A lot of Tiger fans. And it was after the first game on a Friday night when George Bell was slow getting to a ball in the outfield, and Chet Lemon stretched the single into a double. Eventually, he was driven in, and so nobody wanted to ask George why it took so long to get to the. Of course, we all had deadlines, so I made the mistake of saying, George, did Chet Lemon surprise you, or what was the reason that it took so long? And he turned around and he glared at me, and he said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Don't you know the grass was long? I couldn't get to that ball." He was yelling at me and getting really angry. And then he said to me, "I don't know what ball game you were looking at, And finally, I just said, George, who I'd known because I covered him. I said, "I'm not sure what ball game I was watching. What play were you watching when you didn't get to the ball?" Well, that was it. He turned his back, went into the dressing room, went into the showers, and everybody else was mad at me because now they couldn't get their quote. But back to. But he was named the MVP that year, and we were in Dallas covering the winter meetings.
We thought it should have been
19.
Well, of course, yes.
1984.
Well, anyway, and so we went to Dallas, and I remember George being announced as the MVP, and there were 4 or 5 of us who had covered him from Canada who were there, not just for that, but for a variety of reasons. And he turned around, he looked at everybody, said hi to everybody, he looked at me, he said, "Oh, yes, you, Morris, you still fat." I thought it was hysterical. We had a big laugh over that, but that's the kind of personality he was. Right. The other really good personality was Sparky Anderson, of course, who was tremendous. You get a lot of cut and dried people, and but then a lot of the Tiger managers were pretty good. Jim Leland, after the game, hurry up, let me light up. He was really good, and so was. We talked about Michael Ray Richardson, who was the coach of the London Lightning, former NBA player who, tossed away a career by snorting coke. And, and we talked about that quite a few times. One of the best quotes ever. Loved to be in the media, loved to stir up things. And I remember once they were about to sweep the Halifax Hurricanes for the NBL championship, one of the first ones. And, like a lot of coaches would never do this, but he said, we had a photographer out in Halifax, and I was out there, and we needed something for the picture, to run through the day. And he said, "Where's mine?" And he went into the janitor's closet and grabbed the broom and held it up under the basket and said, "Here, take a picture of me because we're sweeping," right? Everybody else was horrified, but Michael thought it was the funniest thing since sliced bread, and there are other different personalities. Like Dale Hunter is one of the quietest, the coach of the London Knights, doesn't like interacting with the media. So we rarely even have any interviews with him. But there's a ton of player-wise, it's up and down, they just give you, a lot of them just give you your standard sort of, the ones who are really good, the Crosbys, players along at that ilk who are used to dealing, with the media, very good quotes and very good personalities.
All right. That was Morris Dalla Costa, part 1. You can see such entertainment there. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with part 2 of our conversation with the great Morris Dalla Costa. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to CK Sports Talk with 99.1 CKXS. To submit your local sports news, info, or score, email news@ckxsfm.com.
Tonight's edition of CK Sports Talk is brought to you in part by Victory Ford Lincoln, 301 Richmond Street, Chatham.
All right. Thank you, Jay Smith, and welcome back to CK Sports Talk. Let's take a look at part 2 of our interview with London Free Press's Morris Dalla Costa.
Morris, I know you've covered a lot of university sports. In fact, that's where we first met you. Tell us about the great Andy Fantus. He's a local kid from here. We've got to know him a bit, number 83. I know he was just a superstar at the University of Western Ontario. What do you remember about Andy Fantus in his early days at UWO?
Well, I can tell you that as far as I was concerned, there was 2 dominant receivers that I've ever seen play. One of them was a Western Mustang player named Williams early on, and the second one was Andy Fantus. If they had an Andy Fantus today, the Mustangs would probably have won a couple more Vanier Cups. That's how dominant Andy Fantuz was. Tremendous hands, great body size, ability to, and he might not have been the fastest, but he certainly had the ability to run routes to precision. The other thing was he's so big and strong, and his body positioning was phenomenal. Throw it up and Andy will catch it was basically part of the deal. So in all the years I've covered sports, Andy was one of the two most dominant receivers that I've ever seen, frankly, at the university level.
Great. And we had the pleasure of seeing him in Hamilton this year and got to talk to him after the game, and a true gentleman. And of course, we're going to have him on CK Sports Talk, Pete, in a few weeks right at Victory Ford.
That's going to be our second live broadcast of CK Sports Talk, and that will be 6:10 p.m. February the 6th. Come on out to Victory Ford. Morris, you're welcome to come too.
Thanks.
Morris, how's the newspaper business, especially sports and the coverage of sporting events, changed since you first started?
Well, it's changed. It's an enormous change, especially with the advent of the online reporting and the internet and things along those lines. Everybody's cutting their staff down. They're cutting expenses. It used to be that everybody traveled everywhere. It doesn't happen anymore. So part of that is reflected in the actual coverage because deadlines are so early. A lot of the stuff that gets in the newspaper is we call it stud horse, which is basically
right.
Joe Blow scored 2 goals, the team won, blah, 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 right? And then later on, after our deadline is gone, we rewrite our story for the internet, which might have more color, more quotes, things along those lines. It's also a lot of it has become milquetoast, as I refer to it. People don't want to upset their contacts. People don't want to have people on their back all the time. A lot of them simply would take the easy way and say, this is how I'm going to report it. And it's going to be, as positive as possible. If something huge happens, of course, I've got to report it. A lot of that is reflected by the fans. If you talk to fans don't want to see criticism of their team. They don't want the radio guy dumping all over their team or the TV guy dumping all over their team, right? And so that's changed. That's changed somewhat, and I think it's an indication that a lot of people, and we've talked about this, that it's really difficult in sports today, and I use this phrase a lot, is you can't march in the parade and cover it as well. It's impossible to do. So if you want to become friends with a team or with players, right, you miss a lot of stories. Every time you're critical, it's like, well, I thought we were good friends, Mm-hmm. The one thing I can't stand is teams saying you're either for us or against us. That's not the point. I don't get paid by the team. I'm not for a team or against the team. I'm for the reader. So this is exactly what the reader needs to hear and see. Am I always right? Of course I'm not always right. But that's the beauty of sports reporting. If you're a columnist, the beauty of sports reporting is being able to interact and being able to argue in a hopefully respectful way, which we're losing that as well. But in a respectful way, but say, no, you know what? I don't agree with you. And that's fine. I'm by no means a genius. So, yeah, it's become pretty much a lot of milquetoast because people don't want to go through the difficult time of answering 50 phone calls or having a head-to-head or like it happened to me when I got kicked out of the arena in Windsor by the NBL Basketball League for writing stuff they perceived to be negative. Right? So they kicked me out. And that's fine. It was their loss, not mine. I got the report on it anyway, and they looked like jackasses. So, you know what? That's the way it is.
I remember that.
You got to take a risk. You got to take a risk because the only people you are cheating if you don't do what you believe is right are the people that are reading you. And I've never really been willing to do that.
Well, Morris, you have so many really great insights into, local sports, national sports, international sports, and I read a quote from you one time, and I really found it interesting. You said that some people take themselves and sports too seriously. Expand on that for us.
Well, when you've been around sports for a long time, you realize one thing. It's a game. They're all games. Doesn't matter if you get paid $40 million, if you get paid, an ice cream cone after you win a little minor. They're all games. It doesn't matter. And I think to equate it into anything else, it is big business, but to equate it to anything else, it really minimizes what it's all about. Sports is an escape. It's something that people love to watch and can enjoy. But to determine that it's life or death is ludicrous. People get really serious. You see them, almost come into fistfights discussing who the better winger is, or I'm a fan, so I'm going to a football game and I'm going to have a few beers and punch out the guy next to me who's not a fan, right? Or the most important thing in the world. And I quite this. I used to laugh with my one of my editors that was a big baseball fan, and he thought, "So it's opening day today. It's great. We're going to spread it across the front page." And I used to say, "You're right. We should." See, there's only 161 games left, right? So to me, we make these people that play sports gods. First of all, they're overpaid for what they do. The attitude of people involved with sports is that they're somewhat better than everybody else because they have this huge following. And I just think that's the case. They take themselves too seriously. They take the game too seriously. If something happened and there was no longer any hockey, how many people would it affect? Probably quite a few. But would it determine a collapse of an economy? Would it start a war? Of course it wouldn't. So let's put it all in perspective. Let's enjoy a game for the beauty of what it is, whatever the sport is. Let's enjoy the people involved in it because they're all very colorful. Let's appreciate it offers us an escape from all the stuff that's around us that drags us down so often. And let's not try and put sports at that level where, hey, I'm not going to enjoy it anymore. I'm going to feel horrible if my team loses. And if somebody says something against my team, I'm going to put death threats on the internet or I'm going to phone them. Let's not do that. Let's leave sports where it is and what it was supposed to be. And yeah, if you want to pay $200 or $300 to see a sporting event, go ahead and do that. But just remember that if suddenly that sporting event wasn't there, it wouldn't undermine anything else in the long term. So stop believing that whoever wins tomorrow's game, it's vital to your well-being or your family's well-being, and enjoy it for what it is, which is a moment of respite from everything else that's around us. It's great.
Well, Morris, Shawn and I are so grateful that you made the trek from the Forest City down to the Maple City, and you're heading to the Rose City. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and we hope we can get together real soon. Thank you again for joining us here on CK Sports Talk.
It's my pleasure. You know what? This is what it's supposed to be about, discussion and fun, and I love talking to you guys. Thanks a lot.
The great Morris Dalla Costa. He was a real treat, folks. Listen, we're going to take another commercial break, and we'll be back with some final thoughts.
Because local does matter. This is CK Sports Talk on 99.1 CKXS.
Tonight's edition of CK Sports Talk is brought to you in part by Victory Ford Lincoln, 301 Richmond Street, Chatham.
All right, welcome back, folks. Any reflections on that, Mr. Moynihan?
As we mentioned several times now, Pete, we've had the chance to meet and talk with Morris multiple times. I like his thinking. I'm for the reader. And I've said he can have a little bit of a bite to his articles. And, it makes good sense. For example, he was one of the first ones that I read that really challenged the World Junior Hockey Tournament. If you remember, site in Montreal.
Ticket prices.
Did not sell tickets. And very expensive. And he was one of the first ones to do an article and really challenge Hockey Canada on why you're putting it in Toronto and Montreal. Why don't you put it in a couple of smaller centers, et cetera, et cetera. So I just have a lot of respect for Morris. And, boy, he runs, Pete. He was telling us that he has to have those articles in by 9:30 and then be up to go somewhere else. And it's a real challenging life for him. That being said, his most interesting comment he ever said to me, I asked him about all these events he covered. And he's covered stuff that you and I would die to go to, i.e. World Series, Canada Cups. And he says, I've covered a couple of basketball games in London, high school basketball games that were absolutely thrilling, that were the best drama in sports a man could watch. So his love of sports, extends from kids playing minor sports to high school to, the highest level of pros. So always a real treat to meet Morris Dalla Costa.
Well, and what really stuck out for me was when he quoted, "I don't believe you can march in the parade and report on it too."
Yeah.
I just thought that was an incredible motto to live by.
For sure. And, the press, of course, is dying today in newspapers, as we know. Morris Dalla Costa, a real throwback.
All right, well, listen, I got to give a couple of props here. I got three of them, actually, Mr. Moynihan. First of all, Milos Raonic, the kid from Thornhill, Ontario. He's the highest seed left in the Australian Open. He's number 3. He's going to take on Rafael Nadal tomorrow night at like 2 in the morning, if you want to stay up and watch that one, to try to win, to be the first Canadian to ever win a major in tennis. Next, Adam Hadwin. Adam's from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, on Saturday.
As he made his mark.
Oh, he shot a 59 at the old Bob Hope Desert Classic. I can't tell you what they call it now, but that's the tournament that he did. He finished in second place, one shot behind the winner on Sunday. Disappointing, but there was only been 12 guys in the history of the PGA to shoot 59, only 4 on a course of 72 like La Quinta where he was. And my third props are the Dresden Junior Kings. I kept saying to Jay Smith, we've had a chance to broadcast with him. The Dresden Junior Kings had key victories. Last Friday, they beat Blenheim 4-0. Then they turned around, were down 3-1 to Moortown at Moortown on Saturday night, came back, won that 6-5. And our prayers might have been answered. The first round matchup, it really looks like it's going to be a clash between the Junior Kings and the Blades. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, that's going to be great. And, Pete, I just wanted to mention, too, last week's guest, Jamie Knight, Wahlsburg Minor Lacrosse. He is highly organized, highly enthusiastic, and committed. I was so impressed with him. Us old-timers love the old days of Wahlsburg lacrosse, and it really was tremendous to hear Jamie and how hard he is working to maintain it. And as he said, there's some big players in the province of Ontario, the Six Nations, the Auroras, Orangevilles, and he's ensuring that Wahlsburg name stays right in there also.
Well, I brought my cousin Ted and my son-in-law over, and we went to the chili cook-off. There were 11 different types of chili. It was really a festive atmosphere at the CBD Club. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if Mrs. Cobb enjoyed it.
Well, hold on. $5 for all the chili you can eat. That's not safe anywhere, Pete. That's terrible. But,
our producer, Corey North, is plugging his nose for some reason. I'm not sure why. But
really a last thought tonight, people. Mark on your calendar, February 6th at Victory Ford Lincoln in Chatham on Richmond Street. Andy Fantuzzi joined us on the morning program today. Lots of things going on with Andy. Always first class, number 83 of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He'll be joining us live, and we're hoping people can come out, get their jersey signed, and shake Andy's hand and wish him well as he enters another season.
Without a doubt, that is going to be something special. Our second live broadcast, that's 2 weeks from tonight. Next week, if you're a fan of Buxton Raceway, we're going to replay our interview, a real neat interview with the O'Leary brothers. That'll run next Monday at this time. Well, sir, for my partner in crime, Mr. Shawn Patrick Moynihan. For our producer, there he is, giving me the high five, Mr. Corey North, who'll be heading south to Ridgetown, that is. My name is Peter Cobb, saying so long.
Thanks for listening to CK Sports Talk. Tonight's show is brought to you by the Chatham-Kent Sports Network and 99.1 CKXS. For more local sports news and information, log on to the Chatham-Kent Sports Network at cksn.ca.
99.1 FM.